Good morning, Year 4. It is the 27th of January, and today we're going to be subtracting fractions. You're doing really well with adding fractions, but today we're going to be thinking about subtraction with fractions. Okay, let's start with a problem. Here we have our in focus task. It says, little boy has 2 bars of chocolate. He gave 5/12 of the bar to the little girl. How much chocolate did he have left? Now, I want you to keep that problem in your head as we go through how to work out a question like that with subtracting fractions. Let's go back to our practical concrete material. I've got 2 holes here. I've got them in thirds, but there are 2 holes. What I want to do is I want to subtract 2/3 from these 2 holes. Well, if I'm just doing it practically, I could have, there's my 2 holes, and I could just take off 2/3, like so. And you can see straight away what you're left with. You're left with 1 hole and 1/3. But sometimes we don't have that practical equipment in front of us, so we need to know another way of doing this. So this is the method that we're going to use. What I've got here, children, is I've still got 2 holes. I've got 1 hole there, and I've got my other hole expressed as 3/3 because I know that 1, 2, 3/3 will make a hole. So I'm showing my 2 holes as 1 and 3/3. Then it is quite easy to subtract the 2/3 off. Okay, because all I can do here, all I need to do is say 3/3, take 2/3. Well, I know that's going to give me 1/3, but I'm going to remember I've got a hole as well. So my answer is going to be left with, I've still got the hole. I've done the 3/3, I'm going to do the 3/3 and take away the 2/3, and that's going to give me 1/3. Just like with my diagram, there's my 2 holes, and I'm going to take off 2/3, and I am left with 1 hole and 1/3. And just like with this written method, it works the same. Let's have another look at another one. What have I got here? Well, I've got 2 holes. They're in quarters. I've got 4 quarters there and 4 quarters there. Okay. Now, my calculation, my question asks for 2 holes, subtract 3/4. Well, again, if I had the equipment, I could take off the 3/4, 1, 2, 3, and I can see I'm left with my 1 hole and 1/4. But you at home haven't got this practical equipment, and you need to know a written method. So let's think again. How am I going to show my 2 holes subtract 3/4? Here we go. Remember, 2 holes is the same as 1 hole and 4 quarters. Up. 1 hole and 4 quarters, same as 2 holes, so I can write it like that. And then I can see 4 take 3, I can do it across the top there. 4 quarters take 3/4 is going to give me 1/4, and then I've got my hole which is not affected, so it's going to be 1 hole still and 1/4. Okay. Let's have a look at this one. A little bit harder because this time I've got 1 hole, all as fifths, so 5/5, 1 hole and another 2/5. So I've got 1 hole and 2/5, and this time my calculation is asking me to subtract 4/5. Well, I could just take off 4/5, couldn't I, with my practical 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can see visually I'm left with 3/5, but I need to be able to do it like this. Okay, so my 1 whole is the same as 5/5, all right, but I've got 1 whole and 2/5. So if I've got 5/5 from my 1 whole and another 2/5, that gives me 7/5. And you can see, just going back to my practical one at the top, yeah, 7/5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My 1 whole and 2/5 is the same as 7/5. And now I've got 7/5, I can subtract 4/5. 7/5 subtract 4/5 is going to give me 3/5. Okay, let's move straight now to one that doesn't have any practical equipment with it. Have a little think. It says 1 4/10 subtract 7/10. Now, it isn't possible to do 4/10 take 7/10, but I've got my whole number here, remember, and my whole number here in tenths, always got to be in the fraction that you're working in, must be 10/10. So if I've got 10/10 here and 4/10, how many tenths could I write down? Yep, that's right, you could write down 14/10. And now we could subtract 7/10 quite easily. Yeah, let me just recap that again. Remember, the whole number is 10/10 and 4/10. So together I've got 14/10. Put those two together. Now I can subtract off my 7/10. 14/10 subtract 7/10 is going to give me 7/10. Okay, couple more. Another tricky one here. I've got 1 whole and 2/8 subtract 5/8. Now again, I'm going to have to use my whole number. Yeah, so my whole number, because we're working in eighths, this time this is going to be 8/8, isn't it? Remember, the 1 whole equals 8/8, right? But then I've also got 2/8 in this part of the calculation. So my 8/8 and 2/8, that gives me 10/8. And my calculation says I need to subtract 5/8. Okay, 1 and 2/8 subtract 5/8 is the same as 10/8 subtract 5/8. And that gives us 10 to take 5, 5/8 as an answer. Okay, let's go back to the problem we started with. We started with this one, 2 bars of chocolate, and he gave 5/12 away. So 2 subtract 5/12. Well, I need to make sure, I need to think about this because I haven't got any 12s there. I'm going to have to think, right, I've got 1 whole and my other whole I'm going to show as 12ths. So 1 and 12/12 is the same as 2. Yeah, and now I can subtract my 5/12. I'm still left with 1 whole, and I can do 12/12, take 5/12, gives me 7/12. Okay, I've still got my other whole number there. That hasn't changed. I've still got that. I'm just subtracting this fraction bit in the middle. Okay, boys and girls, you have some questions like this on Teams to complete. It is a little bit trickier. What you have to remember is just think about what does that whole number represent? Okay, what does that whole number represent? Have fun with subtracting fractions.